All right. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Pristaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharane, Nirvisesha Shunyavadi, Paschatya Desa Tarane. Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I know Gaur Purnima is past, but every day is for Gaur Leela. We just got a report from Mayapur. They don't know 25 or 50,000 people were there to try to watch the Abhishek. Kirtan was led by Govinda Goswami, Govinda Swami, Indradumna Swami, Niranjan Swami, and Shivaram Swami. What to speak of how many people have been coming every day to Mayapur anyway. This is all by Prabhupada's divine mercy. So I was reading yesterday from the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam, where Prabhupada gives a very long summary of Lord Chaitanya's life. So I think this is where I left off. I'm going to try to finish it. It's just when Lord Chaitanya started to talk with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Those who are followers of the Shankara cult are generally known as Vedantists. This does not, however, mean that Vedanta is a monopoly study of the Shankara Sampradaya. Vedanta is studied by all the bona fide Sampradayas. They have their own interpretations. But generally, only those in the Shankara Sampradaya are known as Vedantists. People have no knowledge of the Vaishnava Vedantas. For this reason, the Bhakti Vedanta title was first offered to the author by the Vaishnavas. The Lord agreed to take lessons from the Bhattacharya on the Vedanta, and they sat together in the temple of Lord Jagannath. The Bhattacharya went on speaking continually for 7 days, and the Lord heard him with all attention and did not interrupt. The Lord's silence raised some doubts in the Bhattacharya's heart, and he asked the Lord how it was that he did not ask anything or comment on the explanations of the Vedanta. The Lord posed himself before the Bhattacharya as a foolish student and pretended that he heard the Vedanta from him because the Bhattacharya felt that this was the duty of a sannyasi. But the Lord did not agree with his lectures. By this, the Lord indicated that the so-called Vedantists among the Shankara Sampradaya or any other Sampradaya who do not follow the instructions of Srila Vyasadeva are mechanical students of the Vedanta. They are not fully aware that the great knowledge, the explanation of Vedanta Sutra by the author himself in the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. One who has no knowledge of the Bhagavatam know what Vedanta says. The Bhattacharya, being a vastly learned man, could follow the Lord's sarcastic remarks on the popular Vedantist. He therefore asked him why he did not ask about any point which he could not follow. The Bhattacharya could understand the purpose of his dead silence for the days he heard him. This showed clearly that the Lord had something else in mind. Thus, the Bhattacharya requested him to disclose his mind. Upon this, the Lord spoke as follows: My dear son, I can understand the meaning of the sutras like Janmadhyasya Yataha, Shastra Yoni Twat, and Atato Brahma Jigyasa of the Vedanta Sutra. But when you explain them in your own way, it becomes difficult for me to follow them. The purpose of the sutras is already explained in them, but your explanations are covering them with something else. You do not purposely take the direct meaning of the sutras, but indirectly give your own interpretation. The Lord thus attacked all Vedantists who interpret the Vedanta Sutra fashionably. according to their limited power of thinking, to serve their own purpose. Such indirect interpretations of the authentic literatures, like the Vedanta Sutra, are hereby condemned by the Lord. The Lord continued, Srila Vasudev summarized the direct meanings of the mantras in the Upanishads in the Vedanta Sutra. Unfortunately, you do not take their direct meaning. You indirectly interpret them in a different way. The authority of the Vedas is unchangeable and stands without any question of doubt. And whatever is stated in the Vedas must be accepted completely. Otherwise, one challenges the authority of the Vedas. The conch shell and cow dung are bone and stool of two living beings. Because they have been recommended by the Vedas as pure, people accept them as such because of the authority of the Vedas. The idea is that one cannot set his imperfect reason above the authority of the Vedas. The orders of the Vedas must be obeyed as they stand, without any mundane reasoning. The so-called followers of the Vedanta injunctions make their own interpretations of the Vedic injunctions, and thus they establish different parties and sects of the Vedic religion. Lord Buddha directly denied the authority of the Vedas, and he established his own religion. And only for this reason the Buddhist religion is not accepted by the strict followers of the Vedas. But those who are so-called followers of the Vedas are more harmful than the Buddhists. The Buddhists have the courage to deny the Vedas directly, but the so-called followers of the Vedas have no courage to deny the Vedas, although indirectly they disobey all the injunctions of the Vedas. Lord Chaitanya condemned this. The examples given by the Lord of the conch shell and the cow dung are very much appropriate in this connection. If one argues that since cow dung is pure, the stool of a learned Brahmin is more pure, his argument will not be accepted. Cow dung is accepted, and the stool of a highly posted Brahmin is rejected. The Lord continued. Vedic injunctions are self-authorized, and if some mundane creature adjusts the interpretations of the Vedas, he defies their authority. It is foolish to think of oneself as more intelligent than Srila Vasudev. He has already expressed himself in his sutras, and there is no need of help from personalities of lesser importance. His work, the Vedanta Sutra, is as dazzling as the midday sun, and when someone tries to give his own interpretation on the self-effulgent sun-like Vedanta Sutra, he attempts to cover this sun with the cloud of his imagination. The Vedas and Puranas are one and the same in purpose. They ascertain the absolute truth, which is greater than everything else. The absolute truth is ultimately realized as the absolute personality of Godhead with absolute controlling power. As such, the absolute personality of Godhead must be completely full of opulence, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. Yet the transcendental personality of Godhead is astonishingly ascertained as impersonal. The impersonal description of the absolute truth in the Vedas is given to nullify the mundane conception of the absolute whole. The personal features of the Lord are completely different from all kinds of mundane features. The living entities are all individual persons, and they are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Whole. If the parts and parcels are individual persons, the source of their emanation must not be impersonal. He is the Supreme Person amongst all the relative persons. The Vedas inform us that from him, Brahman, everything emanates, and on him everything rests. And after annihilation, everything merges in him only. Therefore, he is the ultimate dative, causative, and accommodating cause of all causes. And these causes cannot be attributed to an impersonal object. The Vedas inform us that he alone become many, and when he desires, he glances over material nature. Before he glanced over material nature, there was no material cosmic creation. Therefore, his glance is not material. Material mind or senses were unborn when the Lord glanced over the material nature. Thus evidence in the Vedas proves that beyond a doubt the Lord has transcendental eyes and a transcendental mind. They are not material. His impersonality, therefore, is a negation of his materiality, but not a denial of his transcendental personality. Brahman ultimately refers to the personality of Godhead. Impersonal Brahman realization is just a negative conception of the mundane creations. Paramatma is the localized aspect of Brahman within all kinds of material bodies. Ultimately, the Supreme Brahman realization is the realization of the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. Is that Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to all evidence of the revealed scriptures, he is the ultimate source of the Vishnu Tattvas. The Puranas are also supplementary to the Vedas. The Vedic mantras are too difficult for an ordinary man. Women, Sudras, and the so-called twice-born higher castes are unable to penetrate into the sense of the Vedas. Thus the Mahabharata, as well as the Puranas, are made easy to explain the truths of the Vedas. In his prayers before the boy Sri Krishna, Brahma said that there is no limit to the fortune of the residents of Vrajabhumi, headed by Sri Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mai, because the eternal absolute truth has become their intimate relative. The Vedic mantra maintains that the absolute truth has no legs and no hands, and yet goes faster than all and accepts everything that is offered to him in devotion. The latter statements definitely suggest the personal features of the Lord, although his hands and legs are distinguished from mundane hands and legs or other senses. Brahman, therefore, is never impersonal. But when such mantras are indirectly interpreted, it is wrongly thought that the absolute truth is impersonal. The absolute truth, personality of Godhead, is full of all opulences. Therefore, he has a transcendental form of full existence, knowledge, and bliss. How can one establish that the absolute truth is impersonal? Brahman, being full of opulences, is understood to have manifold energies, and all these energies are classified under three headings under the authority of the Vishnu Purana, which says that the transcendental energies of the Lord Vishnu are primarily three. His spiritual energy and the energy of the living entities are classified as superior energy, whereas the material energy is an inferior one, which is sprouted out of ignorance. The energy of the living entities is technically called Chaitra energy. This Chaitra Shakti, although equal in quality with the Lord, becomes overpowered by material energy out of ignorance and thus suffers all sorts of material miseries. In other words, the living entities are located in the material and marginal energy between the superior and inferior, spiritual and material energies, and in proportion to the living being's contact with either of the material or spiritual energies, the living entity is situated in proportionately higher or lower levels of existence. The Lord is beyond the inferior and material energies, as above mentioned, and his superior energy, spiritual energy, is manifested in three different phases, as eternal existence, eternal bliss, and eternal knowledge. As far as eternal existence is concerned, it is conducted by the Sandhini potency. Similarly, bliss and knowledge are conducted by the Ladini and Samvit potencies, respectively. As the Supreme Energetic Lord, he is the supreme controller of the spiritual, marginal, and material energies, and all these different types of energies are connected with the Lord in eternal devotional service. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is thus enjoying in his transcendental eternal form. It is not astounding that one dares to call the Supreme Lord non-energetic. The Lord is the controller of all energies, and the living entities are parts and parcels of one of the energies. Therefore, there is a gulf of difference between the Lord and the living entities. How then can one say that the Lord and the living entities are one and the same? In the Bhagavad Gita also, the living entities are described as belonging to the superior energy of the Lord. According to the principles of intimate correlation between the energy and the energetic, both of them are non-different also. Therefore, the Lord and the living entities are non-different as the energy and the energetic. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego are all inferior energies of the Lord, but the living entities are different. This is the version of Bhagavad Gita 7, 4, and 5. The transcendental form of the Lord is eternally existent and full of transcendental bliss. How then can such a form be a product of the material mode of goodness? Anyone, therefore, who does not believe in the form of the Lord is certainly a faithless demon, and as such is untouchable, is not to be seen, persona non grata, fit to be punished by the Plutonic kings. The Buddhists are called atheists because they have no respect for the Vedas. But those who defy the Vedic conclusions, as above mentioned, under the pretense of being followers of the Vedas, are verily more dangerous than the Buddhists. Sri Vasudeva has very kindly compiled the Vedic knowledge in his Vedanta Sutra. But if one hears the commentation of the Mayavadi school as represented by the Sankara Sampradaya, certainly he will be misled on the path of spiritual realization. The beginning subject of the Vedanta Sutra. All the cosmic manifestations are emanations, inconceivable different energies. The example of a touchstone is applicable to the theory of emanation. A touchstone can convert an unlimited quantity of iron into gold, and still the touchstone remains the same as it is. Similarly, the Supreme Lord can produce all manifested worlds by his inconceivable energies, and yet he is full and unchanged. He is Purna, complete, and although an unlimited number of Purnas emanate from him, he is still Purna. Purnam Purnam Purnadaya Purnasya Purnamadaya. The theory of illusion of the Mayavadi school is advocated on the ground that the theory of emanation will cause transformation of the absolute truth. If that is the case, Vyasadeva is wrong. To avoid this, they have skillfully brought in the theory of illusion. But the world or the cosmic creation is not false. It is maintained by the Mayavad school. It simply has no permanent existence. A non-permanent thing cannot be called false altogether. But the conception that the material body is the self is certainly wrong. Pranava Om, or the Omkar in the Vedas, is the primeval hymn. This transcendental sound is identical with the form of the Lord. All the Vedic hymns are based on the Pranava Omkar. Tat Tvamasi is but a side word of the Vedic literatures. Therefore, this word cannot be primeval hymn of the Vedas. Sripad Sankaracharya has given more stress on the side word Tat Tvamasi than the primeval principle Omkar. The Lord thus spoke on the Vedanta Sutta and defied all the propaganda of the Mayavadi school. The Bhattacharya tried to defend himself and his Mayavadi school by jugglery of logic and grammar, but the Lord was able to defeat him by his forceful arguments. He affirmed that we are all related with the personality of Godhead and eternally, and that our devotional service is our eternal function in exchanging dealings with our relations. The result of such exchanges is to attain prema, or love of Godhead. When love beings automatically follows because the Lord is the sum total of all living beings. Explanation of the Vedas, but it had to be taught by him, Sankaracharya, because he was ordered to teach it by the personality of Godhead. In the Padma Purana it is stated that the personality of Godhead ordered his lordship Shiva to deviate the human race from him, the personality of Godhead. The personality of Godhead was to be so covered that people would be encouraged to generate more and more population. His lordship Shiva said to Devi, "In the Kali Yuga, I will preach the Mayavad philosophy, which is nothing but clouded Buddhism in the garb of a Brahmin." After hearing all these speeches of the Lord, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Bhattacharya was struck with wonder and awe and regarded him in dead Smarama Sloka of the Bhagavatam. 1:7-10, thus assuring him that even the liberated souls who are absorbed in the spirit of spiritual realization also take to the devotional service of the Lord, Hari, because the personality of Godhead has such transcendental qualities that he attracts the heart of the liberated soul. 2. The Bhattacharya desired to listen to the explanation of this sloka. The Lord first asked him, the Bhattacharya, to explain it, and said that afterward he would. The Bhattacharya explained that sloka in a scholarly way with special reference to logic. He explained the sloka in 9 different ways, chiefly based on logic, because he was the most renowned scholar of logic at the time. The Lord, after hearing the Bhattacharya, thanked him for the scholarly presentation of the sloka, and then, at the request of the Bhattacharya, the Lord explained it in 64 different ways, without touching the 9 explanations given by the Bhattacharya. Thus, after hearing the explanation of the Atmarama sloka from the Lord, the Bhattacharya was convinced that such a scholarly presentation is impossible for an earthly creature. Before this, Gopinath Acharya had tried to convince him of the divinity of the Lord, but at that time he could not so accept him. But the Bhattacharya was astounded by the Lord's exposition of the Vedanta Sutra and explanations of the Atmarama sloka. Thus he began to think that he had committed a great offense at the lotus feet of the Lord by not recognizing him to be Krishna himself. He then surrendered unto him, repenting for his past dealings with him, and the Lord was kind enough to accept the Bhattacharya. Out of his causeless mercy, the Lord manifested before him first the 4-handed form Narayan, and then the 2-handed form of Lord Krishna with a flute in his hands. The Bhattacharya at once fell down at the lotus feet of the Lord and composed many suitable slokas in praise of the Lord by his grace. He composed 100 slokas in praise of the Lord. The Lord then embraced him, and out of transcendental ecstasy, the Bhattacharya lost consciousness of the physical state of life. Tears, trembling, throbbing of the heart, perspiration, emotional waves, dancing, singing, crying, and all the 8 symptoms of trance were manifest in the body of the Bhattacharya, which is completely against the Mayavadi Shankaracharya philosophy. Shri Gopinath Acharya became very glad and astonished by this marvelous conversion of his brother-in-law by the grace of the Lord. Out of 100 celebrated slokas composed by the Bhattacharya in praise of the Lord, the following 2 are the most important, and these 2 slokas explain the mission of the Lord in gist. 1. Let me surrender unto the personality of Godhead, who has appeared now as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is the ocean of all mercy, and he has now come down to teach us material detachment, learning, and devotional service to himself. Since pure devotional service of the Lord has been lost in the oblivion of time, the Lord has appeared to renovate the principles, and therefore I offer my respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. The Lord explained the word mukti to be equivalent to the word Vishnu, or the personality of Godhead. To attain mukti, or liberation from the bondage of material existence, is to obtain the service of the Lord. The Lord then proceeded towards South India for some time and converted all he met on the way to become devotees of Lord Sri Krishna. Such devotees also converted many others to the cult of devotional service, or to the Bhagavad Dharma of the Lord. And thus he reached the bank of the Godavari, where he met Ramananda Roy, the governor of Madras, on behalf of Maharaj Prataparudra, king of Orissa. His talks with Ramananda Roy are very important for higher realization of transcendental knowledge, and the conversation form itself a small book. We shall therefore give hereby a summary of that conversation. Sri Ramananda Roy was a self-realized soul, although outwardly he belonged to a caste lower than the Brahmana in social structure. He was not in the renounced order of life, and besides that, he was a high government servant in the state. Still, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted him as a liberated soul on the strength of the high order of his knowledge, his realization of transcendental knowledge. Similarly, the Lord accepted Srila Haridas Thakur, a veteran devotee of the Lord, coming from a Mohammedan family. And there were many other great devotees of the Lord who came from different communities, sects, and castes. The Lord's only criterion was the standard of devotional service of that particular person. He was not concerned with the outward dress of the man. He was concerned only with the inner soul and his activities. Therefore, all the missionary activities of the Lord are to be understood to be on the spiritual platform. And as such, the cult of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or the cult of Bhagavad Dharma, has nothing to do with mundane affairs, sociology, politics, economic development, or any other such sphere of life. Srimad Bhagavatam is a purely transcendental urge of the soul. When he met Sri Ramananda Roy on the bank of the Godavari, the Varnashram Dharma, followed by the Hindus, was mentioned by the Lord. Srila Ramananda Roy said that by following the principles of Varnashram Dharma, the system of 4 castes and 4 orders of human life, everyone could realize transcendence. In the opinion of the Lord, the system of Varnashram Dharma is superficial only, has very little to do with the highest realization of spiritual values. The highest perfection of life is to get detached from the material attachment and proportionally realize the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The personality of Godhead, recognized as a living being who is progressing on that line. Devotional service, therefore, is the culmination of the culture of all knowledge. When Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appeared for the deliverance of all fallen souls, he advised the deliverance of all living entities as follows. The Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead, from whom all living entities have emanated, must be worshipped by all their respective engagements, because everything that we see is also an expansion of his energy. That is the way of real perfection, and it is approved by all bona fide acharyas, past and present. The system of Varnashram is more or less based on moral and ethical principles. There is very little realization of the transcendence as such. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu rejected it as superficial and asked Ramananda Roy to go further into the matter. Sri Ramananda Roy then suggested renunciation of fruitive actions unto the Lord. Bhagavad Gita advises in this connection, 9:27, whatever you do, whatever you eat, and whatever you give, as well as you perform in penance, give it to me. This dedication on the part of the worker suggests that the personality of God is a step higher than the impersonal conception of the Varnashram. Still, the relation of the living entity and the Lord is not distinct in that way. The Lord therefore rejected this and asked him to go further. Roy then suggested renunciation of the Varnashram Dharma and acceptance of devotional service. The Lord did not approve of this suggestion also for the reason that all of a sudden one should not renounce his position, for that may not bring in the desired result. In the further suggested by Roy that attainment of spiritualization freed from material conception of life is the topmost achievement, the Lord rejected this also because on the plea of such spiritualization, much havoc has been brought by unscrupulous persons. Therefore, all of a sudden, this is not possible. The Roy then suggested sincere association of self-realized souls and from any world position, hearing submissively the transcendental message of the pastimes of the personality of Godhead. This suggestion was welcomed by the Lord. This suggestion was made following in the footsteps of Brahmaji, who said that the personality of Godhead is known as Ajita, or the one who cannot be conquered or approached by anyone. But such Ajita also becomes Jitta, conquered by one method, which is very simple and easy. The simple method is that one has to give up the arrogant attitude of declaring himself to be God himself. One must be very meek and submissive and try to live peacefully by lending an ear to the speeches of the transcendentally self-realized soul who speaks on the message of Bhagavad Dharma or the religion of glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His devotees. To glorify a great man is natural instinct for the living beings, but they have not learned to glorify the Lord. Perfection of life is attained simply by glorifying the Lord in association with the self-realized devotee of the Lord. The self-realized devotee is he who surrenders unto the Lord fully and who does not have attachment for material prosperity. Material prosperity and sense enjoyment and their advancement are all activities of ignorance in human society. Peace and friendship are impossible for a society detached from the association of God and His devotees. It is imperative, therefore, that one sincerely seek the association of pure devotees and hear them patiently and submissively from any position of life. The position of a person in the higher or lower status of life does not hamper one in the path of self-realization. The only thing one has to do is to hear from the self-realized soul with a routine program. The teacher may also deliver lectures from the Vedic literatures, following the footsteps of the bygone acharyas who realized the absolute truth. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommended a simple method of self-realization, generally known as Bhagavad Dharma. Srimad Bhagavatam is a perfect guide for this purpose. All these topics discussed by the Lord and Sri Ramananda Roy, there were still more elevated spiritual talks between the two great personalities, and we purposely withhold these topics for the present because one has to become to the spiritual plane before further talks with Ramananda Roy can be heard. We have presented further talks with Ramananda Roy in the book Teachings of Chaitanya. At the conclusion of this meeting, Ramananda Roy was advised by the Lord to retire from service and come to Puri so they could live together and relish transcendental humors. Sometime later, Sri Ramananda Roy retired from the government service and took the pension from the king. He returned to his residence in Puri, where he was one of the most confidential devotees of the Lord. There was another gentleman in Puri by the name of Sikhi Mahidi, who was also a confidant like Ramananda Roy. The Lord used to hold confidential talks on spiritual values with 3 or 4 companions in Puri, and he passed 18 years in that way in spiritual trance. His talks were recorded by his private secretary, Sri Damodar Goswami, as one of the foremost intimate devotees. Lord extensively traveled all over the southern part of India. The great saint Maharashtra, known as Srila Tukaram, was also initiated by the Lord. Saint Tukaram, after initiation by the Lord, overflooded the whole of the Maharashtra province with the Sankirtan movement, and that transcendental flow is still rolling on in the southwestern part of this great Indian peninsula. The Lord excavated from South India 2 very important old literatures, namely Brahma Samhita and Krishna Karnamrita. And these 2 valuable books are authorized studies for the person in the devotional line. The Lord then returned to Puri after his South Indian tour. On his return to Puri, all the anxious devotees of the Lord got back their life, and the Lord remained there with continued pastimes of his transcendental realization. The most important incident during that time was his granting audience to King Prataparudra. King Prataparudra was a great devotee of the Lord, and he considered himself to be one of the servants of the Lord, entrusted with sweeping the temple. This submissive attitude of the king was very much appreciated by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. To arrange his meeting with the Lord, when, however, the Lord was petitioned by his 2 even though it was put forward by his personal associates like Ramananda Roy. Apart from being a divine incarnation, the Lord, his behavior with other persons was also above suspicion. In his dealing, even though the Lord was implored to excuse Junior Haridas for the mistake. Junior Haridas afterwards committed suicide due to being disassociated from the Lord, and the news of his suicide was duly relayed to the Lord. Even at that time, the Lord was not forgetful of the offense. He said at that time the Lord was not forgetful of the offense. He said that Haridas had rightly met with the proper punishment. On the principles of the renounced order of life and discipline, the Lord knew no compromise, and therefore, even though he knew that the king was a great devotee, he refused to see the king only because the king was a dollars and cents man. By this example, the Lord wanted to emphasize the proper behavior of a transcendentalist. A transcendentalist has nothing to do with money and women. He must always refrain from such intimate relations. The king was, however, favored by the Lord by expert arrangements of the devotees. This means that the beloved devotee of the Lord can favor a neophyte more liberally than the Lord. Pure devotees, therefore, never commit an offense at the feet of another pure devotee. An offense at the lotus feet of the Lord is sometimes excused by the merciful Lord, but an offense at the feet of a devotee is very dangerous for one who actually wants to make progress in devotional service. As long as the Lord remained in Puri, thousands of his devotees used to come and see him during the Rath Yatra car festival of Lord Jagannath. And during the car festival, the washing of the Gundicha temple under the direct supervision of the Lord was an important function. The Lord's congregational Sankirtan movement at Puri was a unique exhibition for the mass of people. There's no way to turn the mass mind towards spiritual. That is the way to turn the mass mind towards spiritual realization. The Lord inaugurated this system of mass Sankirtan, and leaders of all countries can take advantage of this spiritual movement in order to keep the mass of people in a pure state of peace and friendship with one another. This is now the demand of the present human society all over the world. After some time, the Lord again started on his tour toward northern India, and he decided to visit Vrindavan. In the neighboring places, he passed through the Jharkhand jungle, Madhya Bharat, and all the wild animals joined his Sankirtan movement. The wild tigers, elephants, boars, and deer all together accompanied the Lord, and the Lord accompanied them in Sankirtan. By this, he proved that the propagation of the Sankirtan movement, the congregational chanting, and the glorifying of the name of the Lord, even the wild animals can live in peace and friendship, and what to speak of men who are supposed to be civilized. No man in this world will refuse to join the Sankirtan movement, nor is the Lord's Sankirtan movement restricted to any caste, creed, color, or species. He is the direct evidence of his great mission. He allowed even the wild animals to partake of his great movement. Okay, excuse me, but I'm going to have to stop for a few minutes here. My voice is bad shape. By the mercy of the time factor, I guess, the sickness is reducing. I just ask people to pray that I can continue to read and share these things with others. This is our real purpose of life, you know.